Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming. With the second half of version 1.5, Honkai Star Rail has bestowed upon us the shiniest of new characters, Argenti. Argenti appears to be a complete goofball in the best of ways, swooping in without warning to defeat monsters all while monologuing, and then leaving with an Irish goodbye. Even his physics in game are goofy. I'm pretty sure plate armor shouldn't have jiggle physics, but somehow his does. Anyway, he is the first playable character to walk the path of beauty, although from a gameplay perspective, he is a physical DPS character who walks the path of erudition. He is our first 5-star featured physical character in Honkai Star Rail. We'll be doing things a little bit differently in this video, starting with the usual stuff, which is an entire guide on Argenti, which covers what you'll be expecting, including his entire kit, relic options, stat priorities, light cones, Eidolons, teams, and finally, what's a bit different about this video, a full E0 free-to-play friendly Argenti and an E0 S1 team showcase, where I'll also provide my honest opinion on this rather comical yet beautiful individual. Now, in order to walk the path of beauty, we must first admire his basic attack, Fleeting Fragrance. Fleeting Fragrance is a largely unremarkable basic attack, and is just the standard single target basic attack, which generates a single skill point, deals 100% attack scaling single target damage at level 6, deals 30 toughness damage, and it actually generates 23 energy because of his talent, which we'll talk about soon, I promise. But before I keep my promise, up next in our beauty pageant is Argenti's glamorous skill, Justice Hereby Blooms. Justice Hereby Blooms is another very straightforward attack that simply deals AoE damage, which hits every enemy on the field for 120% of his attack at talent level 10. And like pretty much every skill in the game, it costs an entire skill point to use. Similar to other AoE skills, it deals a very modest 30 toughness damage to all enemies. And finally, thanks to his talent, it actually generates 30 base energy plus 3 energy per enemy hit by his skill. Don't worry though, it will be time to talk about his talent very soon, as in the next couple of seconds. Which is the perfect extremely subtle segue to talk about his talent, Sublime Object. Sublime Object provides 3 energy for every enemy hit by Argenti's basic attack, skill, and ultimate. Every enemy hit will also provide Argenti with a stack of Apotheosis as well. Each Apotheosis stack provides him with 2.5% crit rate at talent level 10, and it can stack up to 10 times, thus providing him with up to 25% crit rate. Fortunately for Argenti, both his skill and ultimate have perfect AoE, allowing him to gain Apotheosis stacks very quickly against multiple enemies. He also gains a stack of Apotheosis at the beginning of his turn, and it's worth noting that his basic attack will also provide a stack of Apotheosis and generates 3 additional energy thanks to his talent. Apotheosis stacks will last for the rest of the battle, although I didn't test if they last through death and revival. If you've tested this, do let us know down in the comments below. Unlocking one of his major traces also allows him to deal 15% more damage to enemies under 50% HP. And the last thing in this long list of beautiful things that his talent does is that every time an enemy spawns, whether it's summoned or a new enemy appears because of a new wave, Argenti gains 2 energy from each enemy that spawns. As we can see, this talent provides him with a ton of energy, which he's going to need if you know what his ultimate does. Which is another perfectly beautiful segue into his ultimate, actually ultimates. For in this garden supreme beauty bestows, and also merit bestowed in my garden. His fabulously named ultimate has two versions. Starting with his mini 90 energy ultimate, it deals a modest 160% attack scaling AoE damage. It generates of course the standard 5 base energy and deals 60 toughness damage to everything. This may seem unremarkable at first, but thanks to the aforementioned talent, for every enemy hit, it generates 3 energy and 1 stack of apotheosis. This ultimate activates as long as Argenti is between 90 and 180 energy. And at 180 energy, well, Argenti lets out the biggest ult of all ults. After building up so much beauty and being pent up, blasting out his 180 energy ult leads to one of the biggest explosions in Honkai Star Rail. Hoyoverse really enjoys giving physical damaged characters gigantic nukes. Anyway, this 180 energy version ultimate deals 280% attack scaling damage to everything with the initial slash, and then 6 95% single target damage attacks to random targets. As we can see in this example, because this slash finished off the 2 small fries on the sides, all 6 of these single target attacks ended up concentrating on the remaining enemy. This means that against a single target, this thing has a beautiful 850% multiplier. I believe this is actually the largest single target damage multiplier in the entire game, coming from an erudition character. Anyway, similar to the rest of his kit, it activates his talent as well. Generally speaking, it's good to use his 90 energy ultimate to deal with groups of weaker enemies that you're able to one-shot with his 90 energy ultimate. But against thicker, beefier targets, especially single targets, his 180 energy ultimate is preferred. And last but certainly not the least dazzling is his technique, Manifesto of Purest Virtue. Interestingly, this is applied to the enemy and it will still deal 80% attack scaling damage, even if Argenti isn't the one to initiate the fight. This means that I believe it doesn't appear to conflict with any other techniques, thus making Argenti, I guess, a flexible battle initiator. Also, it generates 15 energy for Argenti when the battle begins. As for the stats that his traces provide, Argenti gains 28% attack, 14.4% physical damage, and 10% HP to, I guess, be thematically consistent with the fact that he's a knight, and I guess knights are a bit tankier. For his trace priority, I recommend leveling his ultimate first, then his skill and talent, and lastly his basic attacks. Next, let's talk about adorning this fabulous man with some accessories, aka his relics. Somewhat ironically, Argenti's overall best set is related to the not so, I guess, beautiful sport of boxing, the champion of streetwise boxing. Argenti greatly benefits from both the physical damage as well as the stacks of attack percent that this artifact set provides. And with some support, he can build these stacks very quickly and efficiently. After that, in my opinion, his next best option is various 2-piece combinations, like the 2-piece Champion of Streetwise Boxing plus 2-piece Musketeers. If you have notably better substats on 2-piece combinations, then it's perfectly reasonable to use 2-piece combinations over the 4-piece Champion of Streetwise Boxing. As for other 4-piece artifact sets, I did some math for them, but overall I don't recommend them in comparison to the beautifully savage above options. As for his 2-piece relic options, well, this is actually quite interesting. He actually has 4 viable options. The brand new Firmament Frontline Glamoth, the Inert Salsodo, the Rudolent Arena, and the Space Sealing Station. If you manage to get 135 speed on him and plan to use him with a speed buffer like Asta to occasionally boost him over 160 speed, then the 2-piece Firmament comes out solidly on top, outperforming all the other options. However, if you don't plan to somehow keep his speed over 160 but consistently have 135 speed, then the 2-piece Firmament and the 2-piece Inert Salsodo are basically the exact same. Afterwards, both the Space Sealing Station and Rudolent Arena are quite strong as well. The Rudolent is actually surprisingly competitive because he will utilize his skill frequently in combat. And for these rotation calculations, I'm assuming 3 skills per super ultimate. However, the reason why I do actually recommend the Inert Salsodo a bit more than the Rudolent Arena is because although a good amount of his damage output in a vacuum does come from his skill, oftentimes you're going to want to buff Argenti as much as possible right before unleashing the mother load of all ultimates, which is his 180 energy ultimate. Anyway, lastly, if you have 134 speed or less on Argenti, the Firmament is no longer a recommended relic set for him. Finally, there might be a small case to be made for the Celestial Differentiator, but I think its applications are quite niche. Anyway, this chart is organized by which relics I recommend the most, with the star rating indicating their placements in relation to each other. As for stat priorities, for the body you definitely want a crit body as usual, whichever body helps you maintain the 1 to 2 crit rate to crit damage ratio. You can of course temporarily use an attack body, but ultimately you're just using this until you get a decent crit body. For the boots, I personally strongly recommend speed. Speed boots plus 3 to 4 speed substat rolls will push Argenti to 135 speed. This will allow you to go twice per first cycle in the Member of Chaos, which will enable many 0-turn clears for Argenti. Still, you can of course use attack boots if you have an amazing pair, as a stepping stone while you're farming for speed boots. As for the Link rope, overall I think the attack percent rope is better, providing him a substantial damage boost. However, there will be some situations where an energy recharge rope is nice to have. For example, farming for credits and EXP books. I found an ERR rope to basically allow him to endlessly spam his ultimate every single wave of enemies. In these situations, Argenti reminds me of some fighting game players that literally just spam the same attack over and over. Personally, I have no idea how he's not incredibly dizzy from spinning like this over and over, but nonetheless for big important fights, I do prefer an attack percent rope, but for farming there is a case to be made for an energy regen rope. And I do find his ultimate spam to be endlessly entertaining. As for substats, assuming no relics that boost speed, and with speed boots, you'll need 3 to 4 speed substat rolls to reach 134 plus speed. However, after those 3 to 4 speed substat rolls, you want to go for the usual crit rate and crit damage, followed by attack percent, and of course flat attack isn't useless either. Up next are this beautiful man's beautiful light cone options. Unfortunately, his signature light cone, an instant before a gaze, is, in my opinion, significantly better than his other options. This is because he will do a ton more damage with his ultimate. While you might look at the full rotation of 3 skills and 1 ultimate to have a smaller difference in the light cone rankings, the way you do play Argenti is to try to hyper buff his super ultimate, and mainly use his skills as a way to build energy and for some bonus damage in between his giant ultimates. As such, his signature light cone is far more beautiful than his other options. But at the same time, when you do super buff his ultimates, the difference in damage does shrink a little bit because of the damage dilution from all the stats that the buffs will provide him. Anyway, he does have other reasonable options. The Battle Pass Lycone as Super Imposition 5 is a decent choice as well. In a vacuum per full rotation, this Lycone will be just 12.36% worse. But you do need to get this thing to Super Imposition 5 over the course of 5 entire Battle Passes for this performance. As sadly as Super Imposition 1, we can see that it deals 35% less damage on ult and 25% less damage on the full rotation. So yeah, try to get Super Impositions on this thing if you are planning to use it. Another decent option is Jingyuan's signature light cone. This is overall tied for his second best option with the Super Imposition 5. Today is another peaceful day. Anyway, after that, I'd say his best completely free-to-play friendly option is the Seriousness of Breakfast. Fortunately, being the erudition character that he is, you'll likely want to use him in battles against multiple enemies, and as such he's likely to quickly gain all 3 stacks on this light cone. As Super Imposition 5 and with all 3 stacks, another decent light cone is the Night on the Milky Way. This thing has way too many conditions to keep in mind, but overall I'd say on average, you're probably fighting around 3 enemies, and it's likely you'd have broken an enemy recently-ish. It does have a pretty decent damage ceiling, however the floor of this weapon is pathetic, especially against a single target. Because of the lack of consistency of this weapon, I do think that it is rated somewhat similarly to his other options. Also, I do find that the Make the World Clamor light cone to be a reasonable option, and even debatably his best option out of what's remaining in terms of options. And what might be the perfect ensemble of beauty-admiring team members for Argenti? Well, Argenti is clearly a hyper-carry style of character, and he doesn't mess with his own speed. This means that he's a perfect candidate for Bronya's shenanigans, and he also fully utilizes all the buffs that Bronya provides. By speed tuning him to be 1 speed above Bronya, Argenti can reliably spam his skill on a bunch of enemies, thus generating tons of energy and also dealing additional damage. Speaking of energy, any character that provides Argenti energy, he is going to absolutely love. Tingyuan is the next most obvious candidate, providing massive buffs and an amazing 50 to 60 energy to Argenti. Obviously, the more energy that he gets, the more super ultimates he can do, and he takes full advantage of all of Tingyuan's other buffs as well. Finally, Huohuo also stands out as another great buffer for him, as she actually generates 20% of 180 energy, and provides a solid attack buff while also providing the healing that his team needs. The only issue with this team is the skill point deficit nature of it, but you can always use a few basic attacks to prepare for a super ultimate nuke. Anyway, other characters can of course be used with Argenti. Obviously, you can just plug in any harmony and survivability and you've got yourself another great team. There's also no reason why you can't use other harmony characters besides Tingyuan and Bronya to great effect. Asta, for example, can help him maintain 160 speed for the Firmament relic set, as well as providing him a very healthy attack buff. And Yukong can provide him massive crit stat buffs. And obviously Nihility characters are perfectly great with him as well, as you can run a triple physical team with Hanya, Natasha, and Silverwolf to apply physical weakness more reliably to the enemy. Anyway, most team building tips that fit a hyper carry like Argenti will work extremely well with him, and you'll have a great time buffing up his super nukes as much as possible. Up next is Argenti's pull priority and Eidolons. Argenti is extremely capable at Eidolon 0 with the free-to-play friendly The Seriousness of Breakfast. However, if you are looking to increase your Argenti's power at the cost of quite a lot of Stellar Jade, it depends on what light cone you plan to use with him. If you plan to super in position 5 the Battle Pass light cone, today is another peaceful day, then I recommend going for his Eidolon 1. However, if you don't plan to super in position 5 the Battle Pass light cone, then I recommend going for his signature light cone instead of his Eidolon 1. As for his Eidolons, they're all pretty straightforward and just provide him with more damage. None of them are particularly more impactful than any of the others. And up next, I've got a full Eidolon 0 Argenti showcase for you guys. In the Shenzhou 6 of the Forgotten Hall, Argenti absolutely dumpstered it. This floor in particular is actually quite favorable for Argenti as most of the enemies here are weak to physical. The Argenti in this showcase is at Eidolon 0, but he is pretty well built with max traces, decent relics, and the seriousness of breakfast at super in position 5. We can see here that the first wave is very favorable for his 90 energy ultimate, and it also leaves the enemies with the perfect amount of health for his team to then generate energy and resources for the next wave. Wave 2 is another incredible wave for Argenti as the goldfish bombs keep respawning, which means more free damage on the waifu. Seriously though, I do want Hoyoverse to make some of the waifu enemies playable characters. We can see here that despite using his 180 energy ultimate, thanks to this energy funneling team and Argenti's incredible energy regeneration from his talent, he's able to get his ultimate back up super quickly. And with his second super ultimate, I went for super buffing Argenti so he can nuke the waifu enemy here, dealing over 700,000 damage thanks to all the buffs and debuffs, and easily zero cycling this floor at E0 with the free-to-play friendly light cone, the seriousness of breakfast. And as we saw earlier throughout this video, when it comes to farming, Argenti is very efficient. Hoyoverse also gave him better autoplay AI than most characters. Against weak enemies, Argenti will spam his 90 energy ultimate. This makes farming things like the EXP and credits calyxes hilariously efficient, rivaling that of Himiko plus Herta. And against bosses and elite enemies, autoplay Argenti will actually save up his energy until he can unleash his super ultimate 180 energy nuke. This helps him a lot in autoplay efficiency, and I'm glad that Hoyoverse decided to implement this for him instead of what I was personally expecting from Hoyoverse's autoplay AI, which would just be him being a complete baboon and using suboptimal ultimate options. Anyway, overall I do think Argenti is an extremely good character, but with a slight caveat. He really appreciates Tingyuan, since she provides the extremely crucial 50 to 60 energy, and Argenti makes full use of all the buffs that she provides. And also Bronya for the free turns, which also leads to additional energy. This means that Argenti is of course competing for all the best supports, like honestly most DPS characters. But I personally do think he is a bit more reliant on these supports than other DPS characters like Jingliu and Kafka. Argenti is of course still great even without any of the aforementioned supports, and with other supports like Asta, Yukong, and Silverwolf. Argenti is also just a pretty goofy character, both in his personality and his damage output. You'll see comically huge numbers like you have throughout this video, and also comically low numbers, especially against single targets, when he doesn't have his 180 energy ultimate available. This huge variance in damage makes him a pretty silly character and often quite entertaining to me in many regards. So yeah, we have another, in my opinion, top tier DPS character. This time for the physical element. Initially, I wasn't actually a huge fan of his design, but after using him for a while and embracing this goofball's presentation and spammy nature, I've really come to like him a lot. Let me know what you think about the Knight of Beauty, jiggling armor, Irish goodbyes, and self-aggrandizing credits down in the comments below. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Want to Lose, signing out.